There are probably as many ways to organize a game company as there are game companies themselves. This audio article will focus on 3 models, representing 3 stages of scale, the challenges inherent within each model, and the specific leadership issues that frequently evolve from them. So put on your leader or manager hats and join me, Ryan Wienko, as I have the distinct pleasure of reading a very condensed chapter from Seth Spalding's fantastic new book, Team Leadership in the Game Industry. All coming to you live, and by live I mean pre-recorded, from IndustryBroadcast.com. Start today's article, I would like to thank Seth Spalding for writing such a great book and remind our listeners that you can browse through the IB Book Club at IndustryBroadcast.com to find links to purchase it. Finally, a big shout out to everybody over at Course Technology PTR, definitely the #1 publisher of industry literature in my mind. The strengths and weaknesses of the small developer model. The major strength of the small developer model is the low ratio of overhead compared to the production personnel. The ratio in this model is about 15:1 production versus management and administrative personnel, excluding the possible contribution of outsourcers. The ratio becomes even higher, around 18:1, when the dual responsibilities of certain positions are considered. This makes the project team very production-focused, dynamic, cost-effective, and adaptable. Leaders in this model have the relative luxury of a very light management load in terms of quantity. Assuming that the tech director in this model does biannual reviews, he or she only needs to prepare 3 reviews, and this activity might occupy only a single day. Departmental issues such as purchase requests, timekeeping, and hiring can usually be handled with one quick meeting or by simply turning around in one's chair for a speedy ad hoc conversation. Culturally, this small setup encourages a feeling of community across the company, which can make shared burdens, such as extended overtime situations, a time of positive company-wide social bonding. Within this sense of community, however, exists the potential inherent weakness. Small companies growing out of this phase into larger structures frequently carry the community feeling to a family level, wherein a tightly knit subculture develops among the legacy employees and managers, which can lead to some unprofessional practices. Among the symptoms of this condition is the inclination to retain underperformers and ultimately fail to nurture sustained, skilled personnel who have moved the team and the company at a pace with the industry. Challenges for leaders. Leaders in small companies must set up processes and plans to approach the challenges of this model, with the goal being to prepare to effectively grow into a larger structure. This practice essentially establishes a professional company culture and will certainly add overhead in terms of work and perhaps added personnel. But the rewards to that investment will become evident when the company does expand. A balance needs to be struck here. Professional culture does not mean process-heavy and overly formal. No one wants to work at a humorless job with faceless management, especially in an industry that has a reputation for a casual, even fun culture. Actually, doing this can be a daunting task, but it's not something that should be done in a vacuum. It is very important to solicit feedback from the entire company on work issues, particularly those affecting everybody's workspace, the company's culture, and your employees' quality of life. Leaders in companies at this stage also personally need to carefully walk a fine line between being friendly and becoming friends with team members. This is probably one of the most difficult things for a new leader in a small, tight-knit company to do, particularly in such a structure where there is no other examples of professional work relations to the model. When the time does come for growth within the company, leaders may realize that they have become too personally close with their subordinates and need to make sometimes difficult and awkward adjustments in their social activities. Leaders who are promoted from within teams face this challenge at any size in the company, but like in many other areas, the most difficult attitudes to break are those that have become a key component of the company's culture at an early stage. Mid-size company organization overview. The company has grown to more than 70 people. Typically, managers do very little, if any, production work. This company supports a dual matrix management structure, meaning that project and department issues are handled on separate communication paths. This necessitates another level of coordination outside of normal project communication needs, which is typically handled by a weekly director-level meeting run by the studio head or president. Company culture at this level has the tendency to be more heterogeneous, and that is normal in a structure of this size, but it is important for leaders to be aware of this and to make sure that these social and professional subcultures do not become insular or damaging to the overall mood of the company. It has also become more critical for leaders to ensure that the social structure and activities are inclusive to as many employees as wish to participate. Strengths and weaknesses of this model. Our developer has had some success and has now expanded to a 2-project company. The ratio in this model is about 10-to-1 production versus management and administrative personnel, excluding the possible contribution of outsourcers, of course. In this model, only the design director and art director occupy a dual production and administrative role. The tech director has no production tasks and no project reporting. There are some irregularities, however. At the director level, we see an executive producer as the only non-director job title. This is entirely a nomenclature oddity. The job description of this title in the game industry is quite different from the same job title in the movie industry. Like most things, this may not be universal. There may well be many production directors, which is a more consistent title, but one that I don't hear used frequently. In the mid-size model, I have preserved the design director and the art director as director positions also tasked in production. There's usually one of these, at least, in every company in my experience. In this example, I choose the design director because this position has a much smaller set of direct reports, which makes the dual role easier to manage. Also, this position and set of responsibilities seems not to be uncommon in the game industry. The art director was chosen to illustrate a few points, and because very few companies grow perfectly. Anomalies like this can arise from the best intentions gone awry, rather than poor decision-making or simple inexperience. It's possible that Project 1 in this example started out as a small expansion pack and grew unexpectedly, or it's equally possible that this company, despite its size, had no other artist that had the skill or experience to handle the lead role at the time the project was required to start. There are many reasons why problematic structures exist. The important thing is to recognize them for the potential serious issues they create and to take the action to resolve them intelligently. Challenges for leaders. Leaders in mid-sized companies must be aware and considerate of new communication paths. More cooks are now in the kitchen, and their interaction needs to be coordinated properly in order to be effective indeed, not destructive to the company. In the course of my career, I found that a few things in a company culture are more disconcerting and demoralizing than employees getting conflicting feedback from management teams that does not function well or seems to be confused about their own roles and responsibilities of the other leaders and directors. Here's an example that happens far too frequently. An art director or executive producer in the course of daily rounds chooses to comment on an image that an artist has on his screen, and contradicts the lead artist's feedback given perhaps 10 minutes prior. For this reason, it is very important to explain roles, bounds of authority, and one's place in any approval or feedback channel. The creation of a role or responsibility chart, shown in Chapter 6, Project Team Leader Primer, can help to clarify this to the company. Beyond that, it is the responsibility of the leads and directors to respect and enforce communication channels. Otherwise, dominant personalities on any given team may begin to redefine reporting and approval structures. That said, this is not always a negative thing, as long as the issue gets addressed in some way. For example, suppose an artist on a team has begun to take charge reworking a pipeline outside of his or her specific area, or by leading the push for some greater quality effort on the project. This situation can be resolved by recognizing a new role for that artist, and through this it may be discovered that there may be some inadequacies in the current lead structure or organization. Though some communication behavior may violate the letter of a reporting structure, one should always embrace and encourage any positive energy and results that will make your project and team stronger. On the social front, the growth of an antagonistic subculture within an organization may emerge in companies of this scale, and is a particularly destructive element. Where such conditions are discovered to exist or seen developing, leaders in the organization must take immediate steps to turn the situation around. I've seen conflicts develop between departments, teams, and groups of diverse employees united behind single charismatic individuals. Sometimes the onset is quiet and unnoticeable. Other times it starts as a raging disagreement that never gets properly resolved. Large company organization overview. The company has now grown to more than 150 people. This model is typically found in in-house, publisher-owned studios or extremely successful independent with multiple teams. The management structure has more levels, and the reporting stress falls equally, if not more, on department heads than team leads. Team leads now do very little, if any, production work due to the management overhead they experience. Executive-level project review is typically handled by a weekly director-level meeting run by the studio head or president. Unified company culture at this stage is in danger of evaporating in the face of the growth of many subcultures centered around project teams, disciplines, specializations, or charismatic individuals. A new addition is the position of the board of directors. This can and should exist at all levels of a company, but at this level the board may have a role that goes beyond the formal advisory board at smaller companies. The role of the board is to oversee the performance of the company executives, advise on business questions, and of course be available to network with associates who might otherwise not be available to the company directors. The board traditionally meets quarterly, or is needed in times of unusual activity, such as the potential sale of the company. A marketing director has also been added to this model. The lack of a marketing director in previous models may well have been a weakness in that model. In my own experience, even in a small independent studio, our publishers were very glad to see that we had someone to act as the main point of contact with the marketing department. In the absence of this position, this role would most likely fall on the developer's producer, which could easily overburden him or her at critical stages of a project cycle. Marketing is a very important component to the success of a game, and establishing effective developer communications and coordinations is one of the biggest hurdles to smooth relationships with a publisher. Strengths and weaknesses of this model. Our developer has enjoyed considerable success, perhaps to the point of being purchased by a larger entity, and has expanded to a 3-project company. The ratio in this model is roughly 8-to-1 production versus management and administrative personnel, excluding the possible contribution of outsourcers and the members of the board who are not traditionally compensated but may be significant stakeholders. In this model, no director is in any sort of the production role, which is necessarily due to the size and complexity of each project team. The studio is probably at its maximum effective size, but even still, inefficiencies due to scale may begin to appear. These inefficiencies are typically a result of too few managers or poor coordination and communications between leads, directors, and senior management. John Chowanak, development director at 2K Games and former executive producer at Crystal Dynamics, has this rule of thumb. For every doubling in growth of production staff, management resources need to triple. One of the issues in this model is that the management structure is not very different in size from that of a mid-sized studio. Although the problem of the dual roles at leader and director levels has been rectified, another potential bottleneck has emerged based on team size. Each project has an art and tech lead, producer, and assistant producer, but the team size has expanded a bit. The project team size is around a total of 50, with about 6 of that number involved purely in oversight roles. QA or testing and audio are managed in this model by the producer, but other organizations might put audio as a separate department or under art or design, and QA can certainly be organized under the tech department. Challenges for leaders. The biggest challenge for leaders at this level is the addition of massive planning and coordination efforts, and is making sure that enough attention is paid to the individual members of the company assuming that project-level communication and lead bottlenecks have been resolved. Do the art and tech directors have enough time in their day to make personal contact with and mentor the people in their departments? If so, what form does that take when the art director might be 2 leads removed from the feedback loop that an artist experiences during the day, the first 2 being their specialist lead followed by the art lead? The appropriate communication content needs to be understood by all parties, but in a department of 50 or so artists, is it even possible for an art director to maintain regular contact? One tech director, in my experience, made it a point to engage in a short check-in with every member of his department once a week. This worked fine until the tech department grew to more than 20 people. At that point, he had to move the one-to-one manager meetings to once a month. Personal contact, though, is critical. Information content is flowing through the company, departments, and teams from many sources, all of which need to be managed in some fashion to keep people focused on the mission and values of your company. Communication efficiency has been a recurring topic in each model presented, and at this level, maintaining face-to-face communication is vitally important. Large companies characteristically offer an array of tools to enable people to easily communicate across floors, buildings, or even cities. These include feature-laden phone systems, company-wide instant messaging, and video conferencing. All of these are great, but are usually inferior to personal contact. For this reason, personal contact should be maintained if at all possible. Many times I've seen an email-based communication go completely sour or miss key points, which would have not happened had the communication been verbal. That said, there are also instances which it is advisable to use email, so that a record can be made and preserved of the discussion and decisions. When conditions permit, it is preferable to have a personal conversation followed by a confirmation email. The solution to effective team communication and leadership is not, of course, as simple as making sure that all the boxes in the organization chart are lined up correctly and don't have too many arrows pointing to them. If it were, you would be holding a much shorter book in your hands. As we all know, the crux of great team leadership and successful project teams lies in the leaders themselves and the work environment that they create and support. The reality of the leaders in a given company and the people behind the organizational chart is often unpredictable, irregular, and complex. And this wraps it up for the first insightful article from Seth Spalding. A reminder that this is a very condensed chapter from his book, and if you want the full version as well as all the diagrams and pictures included, we recommend that you head over to industrybroadcast.com and purchase the book through one of the links. Until next time, this is me, Ryan Wienko from Industry Broadcast, signing off, where we continue and strive to bring the collective insight of the gaming industry to your ears.